topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Welcome to the Ask the Expert show on W4CY Radio and Talk4 TV, where we bring you educational information from top local experts in the fields of legal, health, financial, and home improvement. Now sit back and listen to experts in family law, association law, hearing loss, business brokers, home care, along with many other topics. Now here are your hosts, Steve-O and Sophia.
Hey, good afternoon. Welcome to the Ask the Expert show, where we bring you the top experts in the field of legal, health, financial, and home improvement. And boy, do we have a great show for you today. Today's show, this expert has been with us for 10 years. I mean, it goes all the way back to just South Florida, and they opened up an office in Palm Beach, and then they went out to Orlando and Tampa, and we run shows in those markets. But they have been with us for 10 years, and we get more mail from you, the listener and viewer, telling us how much you love the show. And actually, I got one yesterday saying, how come it's not on every week? Well, listen, this firm gives their time once a month for each office. And so that's 3 shows a month to educate you and allow you to ask questions to an attorney without it costing you any money. Today's show, we've got K. Bender Rimbaum. They are a community association law firm, and let's welcome our expert. The newest, she's been with us probably about 6 or 7 months. We love her. Let me welcome you to Kirsten. There you
Hello.
are.
Hello.
Good afternoon, and I love having you on the show. You have just adapted to the show so well. People love the way you answer questions, and because we get so many new people, not just on a monthly basis, but on a daily basis. Tell people about K. Bender Rimbaum and yourself.
Sure. Well, K. Bender Rimbaum started in Pompano Beach, Florida, South Florida. That's actually where I started with the firm in 2010. We have since grown and expanded to Palm Beach Gardens. We have an office in Orlando. And as of late, we have an office on the west coast of Florida here in Tampa, which I manage. So I've been with the firm, going on 14 years. I've been practicing law 15, 14 of them have been with the firm, and I've been practicing, community association law exclusively for most of my career. So, and it's never a boring day at the office, that's for sure.
Well, as we were talking before the show, for some reason this time we got a lot of questions about new laws that they haven't been signed by the governor yet. And there's a lot of them. And maybe we can just highlight 1 or 2. But again, they haven't been signed by the governor. Things can change. But boy, Kirsten, we got so many letters. And because I'm sure a lot of them are board members, have heard about this. So one of them that really stuck out was a lot of stuff for HOAs.
Yes, I mean, there are a lot of bills being considered right now, and if they are signed by the governor, they will go into effect, most of them, July 1st of 2024. Now, some of these
Okay.
bills, I mean, they're over 100 pages long, right? And there's multiple of them.
Yes.
So it's impossible to read every single bill in detail. But I can tell you that, yes, one bill in particular, House Bill 1203, affects homeowners associations, and that has some crazy legislation. For example, it will allow owners with pickup trucks or work vehicles to park in their driveways, regardless of what the community association documents say about vehicles. So even if the community association prohibits commercial vehicles, trucks, work vehicles to be parked in the community, this bill will essentially allow these owners to continue parking their vehicles. The
What do
bill will.
landscape companies do?
I'm sorry?
What do landscape companies do? Don't they have to park their trucks out in front of the
Well,
houses?
this will affect homeowners.
Okay.
Typically association documents, if they do prohibit the parking of trucks or commercial vehicles, they will typically exempt, vendors and contractors that provide services to the homeowner, the temporary parking. But this bill will affect the owners with trucks. The bill will also prohibit association from fining owners for trash infractions. That's typically a common violation that associations tend to fine. Well, now the statute's going to prohibit that. They'll prohibit fining for infractions concerning Christmas lights. So if you keep your Christmas lights through March, you won't be fined, according to this bill. And it will
I like
allow
some of
homeowner
the
associations.
education.
Huh?
I like some of the education, the certification that there is going to be mandatory if it gets passed.
Yes. And particularly for condominium associations, the way the law reads right now is new directors, officers have to make a choice. They can either attend a division approved course, or they can sign a certificate attesting that they have read their governing documents and will uphold them. Well, this new bill will essentially require directors to do both: attend a course and then certify that they've read the documents. And it will apply not only for new directors and officers, okay, who will still have to comply with this within 90 days of being elected or appointed, but it would also apply to any existing directors. And there's a time frame put in place there for any existing directors to comply.
I also noticed about the website, and I think it's a minimum of how many homes you have will have to have a website. And I also see they're lowering condos too for having to have a website.
Yes. So currently for condominiums, you need only condominiums with 150 units or more have to have a website. That threshold is going to be lowered to 25. And a lot of communities already have websites, so it might not necessarily impact a lot of communities.
Let's go to our phones. Let's go to Joel. Hi, Joel.
Hi, how are you? I may be off topic here. I have a question about condos, but can I, if I can ask it? I didn't realize it was HOA, but can I?
No, either way.
Into a condo question. All right, thank you. In a situation where there's some delinquent owners who have had their voting rights suppressed, let's call it, or suspended, where there's a meeting of owners of the condo, those delinquent owners don't count in a quorum, as I understand it, and can't vote at the meeting. But the question is, can they speak? I'll leave it to you.
Yes, they should still be able to speak. Owners are entitled to speak as to any designated agenda items at board meetings and membership meetings. So the suspension of voting rights really should not affect their ability to ask questions or speak at these meetings, as to designated agenda items, of course.
Right. And again, they don't count for a quorum, though. Is that correct?
That is correct. Assuming that the board has properly suspended the voting rights at a duly noticed board meeting, then yes, the owners whose rights have been suspended would not count towards the quorum requirement, and would also not count towards the voting percentage necessary to approve the specific action. So, for example, if the board is trying to get amendments passed and you have a condominium of 100 units, and let's say the voting rights of 10 owners were suspended, then let's say your quorum is a majority of the owners, then quorum would count as a majority of the 90, not a majority of 100 owners. And then let's say your amendments need the approval of a majority of the owners, then it would be, again, a majority of the 90, not a majority of the 100.
Okay. But the delinquent owners can still speak.
Yes, should be able to speak.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Joe. Let's go to, we have a lot of people who have sent text in. Let's go to their questions. Does a declaration of condominiums ever expire? That's from Helen in Wesley Chapel.
You know, they're different from HOAs, and the answer is no, they would not expire. For HOAs, that is a little bit different. They have, they're valid typically for 30 years from the day the declaration is recorded. Okay, and then the board has to take certain action in order to preserve that declaration from being extinguished. And if the board does not take action to preserve those documents within the 30 years, well, there is a process for the board to revitalize those documents, but at that point, that process would require membership approval, and you need to get approval of the Department of Commerce to revive the document. So it becomes a more complicated process for HOAs. But for condominiums, the condominium documents are good. There's no expiration date.
Well, I got to tell you, Kirsten, your show has just become so popular. I just looked at our chat line, and here we've got our second question up there. True or false? In an HOA, when it is requested from management company, and it contains a $1,000 fine, you can ask that the S1K fine removed from the estoppel letter and does not have to be paid. Is that true or false?
So if the association receives an estoppel letter, and an estoppel letter is essentially an HOA. It's an estoppel request is made typically when an owner is selling a unit or a home in the community, typically done, prior to closing. You'll get this request for information, essentially. So the association will have to identify, certain statutory information, including any assessments owed on the unit, any violations. So, as to the viewer's question on a fine, I mean, it would be to the best interest of the association to identify any existing violations and any fines, because you'd want them to get paid and addressed by the buyer. But I suppose if the board is not interested in getting the fine paid, just don't disclose it on the estoppel letter. Okay, but if that fine is not disclosed, or if that violation is not disclosed on the estoppel letter, and then the closing happens, then, the association is going to have a really hard time trying to enforce that violation or fine after the fact. So just be aware of that.
Let's go to Karen. She wants to know, we were just talking about this, can enclosed cargo trucks park in their driveway without current license or registration in condos?
Well, I think that's going to be very document specific issue. I mean, there's nothing in the statute currently or in any pending legislation that addresses the parking of commercial vehicles, trucks. So it really is going to depend on what the declaration prohibits. And if it does prohibit those types of vehicles from parking in the condominium, then, the association should be enforcing it.
Here's Kelly wants to know, I was told I could not speak at a board meeting, only if the board allowed me to.
Well, every owner has the right to speak as to designated agenda items. Now, it is up to the board, at what point to take these owner questions or comments. And some boards allow for comment and questioning at the end of each agenda item, or sometimes they might leave comments to the end. But certainly owners are entitled to speak at board meetings as to designated agenda items.
Okay, let's go to Jack in Clearwater. And we got a lot of questions about the structure reserve study, but he wanted to know, can you go over some of the structural reserve studies?
Yes. It is a complicated piece of legislation, no question about it. And, we do a legal update class frequently where we, discuss the SIRS and the inspection and all that. But essentially, the structural integrity reserve study, it's a reserve study of the funds that the association will need to repair certain reserve components, right? And only if the condominium association existed prior to July 1st of 2022, and it's controlled by the unit owners, not a developer, then only those associations have to complete the SIRS by December 31st of 2024 for each building in the condominium that is at least 3 stories or higher. Now, you could be in a multi-condominium situation where there's one association that operates multiple condominiums, and you could have condominiums that are 2 stories, or you could have condominiums that are 3 stories or higher. So in that scenario, again, it's the SIRS. You would only have to do the SIRS for condominium buildings that are 3 stories and higher. And after you do your first SIRS, then you have to do a SIRS pretty much every 10 years. The visual inspection of the SIRS has to be done by a licensed engineer or a licensed architect or a certified reserve specialist. And, the items for which you have to do the reserves basically are identified in the statute, and they include, the roof, the structure, fireproofing, waterproofing, painting, windows, doors. But again, the statute was clarified in the last legislative session that these reserve items are only as to what the association maintains. Okay, so windows and doors, they're part of the SIRS, but only for those windows and doors that the association maintains. Okay, so that you'd have to look at the governing documents to see, who's responsible for windows and doors. once you do the SERS study, the statute also says that for any budget that is adopted after December 31st of 2024, those associations that are required to do SERS can no longer, waive the funding of SERS or vote to partially fund them. So for any budget adopted after December 31st, 2024, associations have to fully fund the SERS items. Now, that means that if your association is not yet ready to fully fund SERS, okay, if owners, and that is completely a business decision of the board, but if you want owners to waive or partially fund those SERS, and those owners vote to waive or partially fund the SERS before December 31st of 2024, and the board then adopts a budget with either waived or partially funded SERS, then that's okay, as long as it's done before December 31st of 2024. After that, you have to fully fund. And then again, after December 31st, 2024, the association will not be able to use the SERS for any alternate purposes. So reserve funds allocated for the SERS items could only be used for the SERS items. Now, you can pool SERS reserves, okay? You just can't pool SERS reserves with any other non-SERS items. So again, the SERS applies for those condominium associations with buildings 3 stories or higher. But the statutory reserve requirements that have always existed in the statute, those have not gone away. They're still there. And, just a reminder, condominiums, whether it's 1 story, 2 stories, and even 3 stories and higher, still have a statutory obligation to fully fund reserves for roof, painting, paving, and any other item whose deferred maintenance replacement cost will exceed $10,000. Now, roof and painting are part of the SERS, but you could have items such as paving, which is not part of the SERS, or you could have elevators, or you could have seawall repairs. Okay, those are not necessarily under the SERS requirements, but you could still you still have an obligation to fully fund those reserves. Now, for those non-SERS reserves, the board still has the ability to present to the owners the option to waive or partially fund those non-SERS reserves. That has stayed. The only thing that changed in the statute last year was that the vote to waive or partially fund those non-SERS reserves was changed from a majority of quorum to now a majority of all the voting interests. So, it's making it increasingly more difficult for owners to waive or partially fund these reserves.
Let's go to Paul is on the phone. Good afternoon, Paul.
Hey, how you doing today?
Doing well. You have a question for Kirsten?
No, it wasn't a question. It was more of a way of finding out what they can do as far as the vehicles parking in the driveways with no registration or licensing on that vehicle. Most of the time, the county itself has rules for registered vehicles parking in your lot. They consider them to be a abandoned vehicle or a junk vehicle when they're non-registered. The easiest way for them to find out is to call their county, and their county will put them over to the department that handles complaints as far as code enforcement. So that's something that you would definitely want to have the homeowners check into, or actually the board members check into before they get themselves in trouble.
Good. Thank you so much.
Good suggestion. Yep.
Kirsten, do you have your schedule in front of you for your classes?
Yes. we have, I have the scroll for the March classes. Let's see. So March 6th, we have a course, a webinar on fair and consistent HOA violation enforcement that's taught by attorney Emily Gannon. So she's going to talk about how to properly and uniformly enforce covenant violations. Then March 20th, we have a webinar on the screening process, how to develop procedures and train your committee. And this would apply if the association has the authority, the ability to approve or disapprove tenants or buyers and want to institute a screening process. Then let's see, March 20th, we also have an HOA board member certification. So those new board members who still have not done their board certification requirements, this would be a good time to do that. And then attorney Alan Schwartzide from our Orlando office will be teaching March 26th, a webinar on collections. We have a condominium board certification class, March 27th, taught by attorney Andrew Black from our Pompano office. And these are all webinars. And then I'm going to be teaching on March 28th, also a webinar on funding construction projects. So I will be discussing the different sources of funding. And I will be collaborating actually with a banker from Synovus Banking who will also talk about the loan process. As you know, with the SIRS and milestone inspections, a lot of associations need to do a lot of construction work. And so they're trying to figure out what their funding options are. So we'll be talking about that.
Oh, that'll be a great one. We're going to go to our break. Give everybody your phone number. If you can, the number that doesn't matter, it'll reach any of your offices and your website.
Yes. The main number for any of our offices in Florida is 954-928-0680.
And the website is kbrlegal.com. We're going to go to break. Everybody, all of our phone callers and everybody who's on hold, we'll be right back and we'll get your calls and your letters.
K. Bender Rembaum is a full-service community association law firm dedicated to the representation of community associations throughout Florida. On kbrlegal.com, you can learn more about their offices in Pompano Beach, Palm Beach Gardens, Orlando, Tampa, as well as throughout Miami-Dade by appointment. Several K. Bender Rembaum attorneys are board-certified specialists in condominium and plan development law and assist clients with all matters of community association legal issues while keeping them up to date on new developments that affect their associations. K. Bender Rembaum is also a well-known provider of free legal education for managers and board members. Contact K. Bender Rembaum today by calling 800-974-0680. That's 800-974-0680 to reach any of their locations. You can also visit them online at kbrlegal.com or write to them at info@kbrlegal.com.
And we are back with the Ask the Expert show on W4CY Radio and Talk4 TV with your hosts, Steve-O, Sophia, and their expert guests.
And we are back. This is the Ask the Expert show. We are here with attorney Kirsten Hens, and she's with the K. Bender Rembaum law firm. They do community association law, and they have been with us for 10 years. We are always so glad to have them. This is our newest of all the shows we do with K. Bender Rembaum, and already they've caught up with everybody on the amount of phone calls, the requests that people have made. We've got our first phone call since we're back. Let's go to our first call. Pete, are you there?
Yes, how are you? Can you hear me okay?
Good, buddy. We can hear you fine.
Okay, yeah, I have a question about the fine confirmation committee and their hearings. I understand that the compliance committee's job is only to either confirm or reject a fine that's levied by the board. If the compliance committee, can they reject a fine levied by the board if the board has not been consistently fining for the same thing? In this example, it's an overweight dog.
So is the question, can the basis for rejecting the fine be that the board has not uniformly enforced this restriction?
Yes, in other words, the board hasn't been consistently fining all dogs over a certain weight.
Yeah, I mean, that can certainly be a basis. Yes.
But in particular, I'm asking whether the compliance committee would have the power to do that.
As you mentioned, the role of the committee is really not to negotiate the fine, reduce the fine. The role is really to either confirm the fine or reject the fine. So whether they want to reject the fine because they don't think there's enough basis to adopt the fine, or the association has not been uniformly enforcing that restriction, that's up to the committee. The ultimate vote is a no. And if they vote no, then the fine basically cannot be imposed. And it dies there, essentially.
Does that answer your question, Pete?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
But if I may just kind of piggyback on that, Steve, if the board hasn't uniformly enforced that weight restriction on pets, then they're going to consistently run into the same issue, right? They're going to try to find an owner, and then the issue is going to go before the fining committee, and then the committee is going to, reject the fine. So, what the board needs to do is consider, republishing, going through a process called republication to resurrect a restriction that they have not uniformly enforced in the past. So in this case, it would be to resurrect this weight restriction on pets. And it is a process that can be done by board at a board meeting. It would mean that the existing violation, so all those pets who have exceeded the weight limitation, they would need to be grandfathered in. Okay. And then the association would be able to enforce the violations basically going forward from the day that they took that action. I think once they do that, they would be in a much better position to start imposing fines or levying fines.
Okay. Let's go to Joanne. She wants to know, does the president of a POA have a right to not share our attorney's legal opinion with the entire board of directors?
Does she have a right not to share? Can you read that again?
Not to share. Does the president of the POA have a right to not share our attorney's legal opinion with the entire board of directors?
No, I mean, the opinion of the of legal counsel was rendered to the director. I presume the president was just an authorized point of contact. But in my opinion, the rest of the directors are equally entitled to the legal opinion of the POA's counsel.
Okay, let's go to, this is a question that Kelly submitted. When preparing the proposal budget, is it required or best practices to use the audits from the latest monthly financials? And should the contracts be on the proposed budget?
Well, I mean, a proposed budget is exactly what the name implies. It's a proposed budget, based on, estimated, um, expenses. I mean, if you have actuals, that's great, but you're going to be estimating what your, potential budget for next year is going to be, and I presume they're going to be different, right? The cost of living is going up, keeps going up.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go to Barb in Tampa.
I
Change
think
of
Jeff,
board.
hold on, see if there was, I saw someone else's comment about the proposed budget, right? Isn't a budget, no matter how hard you try, really just the best guess? Exactly. And that's why once the board adopts a budget, if there's a shortfall in the budget for your operating expenses, the board can still amend the budget at any time throughout the year, following the same procedure for adopting budget, in order to get the necessary funds to pay their expenses. I mean, that's their fiduciary obligation. And if necessary, you might be in a position to even adopt a special assessment. So.
Okay, let's go to Barb in Tampa. There's a change of board, and the minutes from the previous meeting were not signed. How do we sign the minutes for a previous board, and are the contracts valid?
Well, I'm not aware of anything in the law that requires these minutes to be signed by a board, but the new board can certainly approve these minutes at the next board meeting. If the board adopted or approved contracts, they should be valid, unless there's any reason to suggest otherwise. So, the board should be following through on those contracts.
Okay. Kelly in Tampa wants to know, if a board member resigns, does the open seat have to be filled by the members that ran for the board but did not get elected?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Typically the answer is no. There's nothing in the statute that says that. So, unless the governing documents require that, which I've never seen it, so it's very unlikely. If there's a vacancy on the board, essentially the remaining directors who are seated can choose how to fill that seat. If there is a director that was not elected that's willing to now fill that seat, that could be a viable candidate. Otherwise they can, ask around the community to see who wants to fill the seat. And if not, if they know of anyone else, they can just appoint them.
I know we've talked about parked cars and trucks. Stefan and Brandon wants to know, what authority does the HOA board have to tow cars parked on common area streets? Do they need to post a 24-hour notice on the car, or just a notice at front of the HOA?
So, for purposes of this question, I'm going to presume that these streets are private. So common property,
Yes.
but they're private and they're owned by,
road, yes.
Yeah, they're owned by the association. Because if you have a community that doesn't own the streets, then you really have no authority to tow from them, right? That would be up to the county or the municipality. But As long as the association has authority in their governing documents or rules to, to control vehicles or to adopt rules concerning parking, that would have the authority to enforce it. One of them being through towing. Okay. There is a towing statute in Florida which addresses notice requirements. I don't believe there's a 24-hour, there's a prerequisite for a 24-hour notice, posted notice requirement unless the documents or the rules require it. But the statute does say that there has to be certain signage throughout the community in order for the association to properly tow without, being subjected to legal action. So I would just, if the association is going to be entering into a contract with a towing company, I would just make sure and confirm that they have all the requisite signs posted in accordance with statute.
Okay, let's go to Rebel. Let's go to Kelly's comment. He wants to know when a written request for records states an owner would like to review the manager's contract, is that something the board has to allow?
Yes. So management contracts are not exempt from inspection. Personnel records for condominium associations are exempt from inspection, but a management contract specifically is not. So if an owner wants to see what the manager makes, that's fair game.
Okay. So I'm going to go back to our questions that you wrote in. Here's Lincoln and Largo. Can we change our resolution to 3 board of directors?
So I think the question is if I guess this board can amend the documents, to change the size of
the board
resolution. Yeah. So this board, this board wants to reduce the size. You'd have to specifically look at the bylaws of the association to see how many directors need to be seated on the board. Okay. And then how can the size of the board be changed? You might have language that requires membership approval. You might have language or this provision might be written in a way that requires an actual amendment to the bylaws. Or a third option is that this provision could be drafted to allow the board in its sole discretion to change the size of the board, in which case, if that's how it's written, then this can be done at an open board meeting, duly noticed with 48 hours in advance.
Go to Jackson and Brandon. We have a separate fining committee. Do they have to open their meetings up to the residents also?
Yes. A fining committee, or generally most committees, yes, they have to also be properly noticed and open to members.
Maryland Clearwater went, so how do our out-of-towners get to vote when they say they didn't ever get anything about the voting package? We've actually had several like that, people who I guess live out of town and were not made aware of voting going on.
I mean, I think that's, for as a practical matter, just contact your property manager if you have one, or the secretary of the association, and, request a copy of the notice and I presume a limited proxy, or, depending what vote is being taken.
James in Riverview wants to know, they are an HOA and they said the developers are going to turn over the property to us. What if there is no money in the bank? Is there a checklist or what to do before the developer turns the property over to the board?
Developer turnover. So when the developer when the community turns over from the developer to the unit owners, there is a requirement in both 720 and 718 for the developer to provide certain information and documentation. And among that documentation is the developer has to provide are audited financial records. So you should be receiving audited financial records, and there's a specific time frame within which the developer has to provide those to the unit owners. And then, my recommendation is when you do receive these financial records, that the association then go ahead, or the board, hire an independent accountant to look through those financial records and then conduct their own audit of all the financial transactions of the developer to make sure everything's in order. And if not, then speak with your legal counsel. At that point, it would be association counsel to see what claims you might have against the developer.
We're going to go to Joe. Wants to know, can legal opinions to the association be the subject of a document request?
So any opinions, written opinions rendered by association legal counsel to the board are subject to attorney-client privilege. Okay. Whether something is in litigation or, pending or active case, really any legal opinions of counsel are protected by attorney-client privilege. So they are not subject to inspection by owners.
Okay. But I got to tell you, we are getting we are being inundated by calls and by letters, and I just want to tell
here for
everybody
another hour.
Easily. I just want to tell everybody how much we appreciate you taking the time to write these letters, to call into the show, and my hat's off to poor Kirsten. Right now, she's sitting here through an hour show with low back pain, which if you've ever had low back pain, the last thing you want to do is sit there for an hour answering questions. But Kirsten, we so appreciate you. You have no idea. Your show is doing wonderful, and people just love you. So it's worth it.
Thanks, Steve.
Anyway,
pleasure.
we are going to, that's it for us today. Kirsten's with us every month, and it's always the last Tuesday of the month at 5:00. Let's give everybody the phone number again and your website.
Sure. The main number is 954-928-0680, and the firm's website is kbrlegal.com.
You are the best. Get better, and we'll see you next month.
Thanks, Steve. See you then. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in.
It's Kay Bender Rimbaum. Been with us for a long, long time. Folks, thanks again for tuning in today. I'm so sorry we didn't get to all your questions. If you're watching, what you don't see in the background, we get about 20 to 30 questions each month from each city. So we've got a lot of people, but whatever we didn't get to today, we will get to next time. Thanks again. Thanks for our great producer, Rebel. We'll see you again next month.
Thanks for tuning in today to the Ask the Expert show on W4CY Radio and Talk4 TV. Tune in next week and every week to hear more from our experts on personal injury, insurance, air condition repairs, estate planning, Medicare, and many other topics in the areas of legal, health, financial, and home improvement. See you next week.